Good morning and welcome to today's webinar titled Nonprofit Board Roles and Responsibilities. My name is Andy Carey. I'm the Executive Director of the U.S.-Mexico Border Philanthropy Partnership, and we're excited to have all of you with us today. Today's effort is possible due to the generous support of the San Miguel de Allende Ayuntamiento. We want to give a special shout out to Francisco Garay Russo, who's the Director of Economic Development and International Relations and Nonprofit Organizations, and to his team member, Fernanda Esparza, who's the Underdirector for International Relations and Support Nonprofit Organizations. Fernanda, thank you so much for joining us today, and I'd like to give you a chance to say hello.
Hi, welcome everyone. Thanks to Andy and Malaura for working in this alliance in which we'll continue working for associations in San Miguel de Allende. Thank you.
Fernanda, it is our pleasure. And as I shared with you in our opening session this morning, and I want to also give a shout out to my colleague and friend, Maria Laura Munoz, who's joined me on several occasions in San Miguel. Laura, thank you so much. And also I want to give a shout out to our teammate, Celit Banuelos, who is our program specialist in the border region. And Celit is also just a terrific member of our team. And I want to thank them both for their contributions for today's session. Before we get started, I'd like to, questions and answers are certainly welcome during the session. If you would raise your hand, my colleague Malaura is going to be watching for questions. So if there's a need to ask a question, we're happy to answer them. And there will be plenty of time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. We are scheduled to go until 10:30. I don't know that we'll use the whole time, but we're scheduled to go from 9 to 10:30 Pacific Standard Time. And today's session is being recorded. So if you'd like to share this with other members of your board that were not able to join you, we will make that available. And today is also just the beginning of a renewed opportunity to continue to support the nonprofit sector in San Miguel de Allende. Since 2014, we have held numerous sessions with friends and colleagues across Mexico and across the United States to share best practices around volunteerism, fundraising, communications, marketing, social media, so lots of different topics and suggestions. And if there's additional ideas that our attendees have today to be able to support you in your work, please let us know, and we look forward to future trainings. Additionally, I would like to share with you that you are all cordially invited to have your organization become an official member of the U.S.-Mexico Border Philanthropy Partnership. You can check out our website at www.borderpartnership.org, and we look forward to supporting you. We have several members and allies in San Miguel de Allende, and we would be honored to have more. So thank you all and welcome. I want to make sure before we proceed, I just want to make sure that there's no questions that have developed, and I think we're good to go. So we're going to get started. Well, first and foremost, this is, all right, there we go. Our organization is the only binational nonprofit organization along and across the 2,000-mile border region that unites a vibrant network of leaders and organizations at the national, regional, and local level. These are organizations making a difference on both sides of the U.S. border. Today, we have over 350 organizations from academia, business and corporate partners, nonprofit organizations, government agencies, and grant-making foundations participating with us. We support a network of organizations that build prosperity through leadership, collaboration, and philanthropy in the U.S.-Mexico border region. But today's topic is nonprofit board roles and responsibilities. As all of you know, as volunteers, or if we have some staff members amongst us today, the relationship between the board and the staff and the organization and volunteers is critical to the success of the organization. And one of the things that's really important to keep front and center is to understand whose role it is and whose responsibility it is to lead the organization across the various things that have to happen. And so when you agree to serve as a board member, you're making a commitment. While you're still a volunteer, you've made a commitment to provide fiscal oversight, to provide executive oversight, to provide critical knowledge, information, expertise to the organization so that they can benefit from your incredible leadership. And so it's a huge responsibility. And we always talk about it in Spanish, we say, pongamos la camiseta. And what that really means is, let's truly serve the organization and their interest to achieve their mission locally. And so one of the things I'd like to start out with today is, what is it that the board is supposed to do? And I know many of you know this already, but it's always good to have an opportunity to go back to school a little bit and just review and have an assessment. And so today I want to share with you that the board's role is really to determine the organization's mission and purpose. And when you talk about determining their mission, it's really important that you have a mission that you can recite easily, quickly. If somebody says, well, what does your organization do? You want to be able to tell them who you are, what you do, and why you do it. You also want to make sure that the organization is following its bylaws. The bylaws are not just a document to have to say, oh, we have our bylaws. It's important if you have bylaws that you follow them. And so if you're not following your bylaws, you should have a review session as to what your bylaws say, find out where you're compliant, find out where you're not compliant, and actually work to make yourselves compliant. You don't want to have a legal document that you ignore. And that helps us be more accountable and transparent. The U.S.-Mexico Border Philanthropy Partnership, over the past several years, we've made several adjustments to our bylaws because we need to be flexible. Our board switches leadership between the U.S. and Mexico every 2 years. We had to change up when our annual meeting was. We have to determine what language we're going to operate in. So we had a lot of things that we needed to determine, and we also needed to structure our board to be able to invite more people to come in and allow them to stay for longer periods of time. Since our board membership comes from both countries, we needed to be able to allow for people to serve throughout as both as a member of the board and then become an officer. And for our organization, you spend 2 years prepping for office, then you're in office for 2 years, and then you serve for an additional 2 years providing advice and consent to the new leader. So it's a big commitment. But because of that large commitment, we also had to adjust our bylaws to allow for people to stay for an extended period of time. Obviously, the board provides proper financial oversight. And do you have those oversights? Do you have policies and procedures? So lots of good questions for you to ask. And when I say policies and procedures, they could be about different things. For example, what is the spending limit of your executive director? Do you have a payment that goes out? Do you require 2 signatures? At what point? You also want to be nimble. You don't want to make every expenditure have to be approved by 2 people. In our organization, we started out with a spending limit of $2,500, but we eventually upped that to $5,000 because by having it at $5,000, it lets me do all the monthly typical expenditures that we have without having to hunt down a leader. And for our organization, because our board leadership comes from 2 different countries across 10 different states, it's very difficult to get a second signature sometimes. So you have to have the proper financial oversight, but you also want to have systems in place that allow you to be nimble and to function appropriately. Obviously, it's important that the board support your chief executive and to assess his or her performance. And I don't mean watching everything they do every day, but setting out realistic goals and objectives for your executive director or your CEO and giving them all the room to achieve it and supporting them along the way. Obviously, in ensuring effective organizational planning. Do you have a calendar of your activities? Do you have a calendar of your board meetings? Do you have a strategic plan in place? These are all the different things that you're going to be assessing as a member of the board. It's also really important to ensure that the organization where you are serving has adequate resources. This means human and financial resources. It's important that we have enough money coming in the door to pay all the bills, but it's also important that we have enough staff to carry out the work of the organization, and that we have enough volunteers to engage and support the work. And it's a great way to help get people involved, is to invite volunteers to, it also helps, is a way to help guide people to determine to become a part of the board at some point. The board of directors also determines and monitors and strengthens your programs and services. It's up to the board to determine what programs and services you should be offering, not choosing the colors and the silly things about the programs and services, but determining that you want to have a training program, that you want to have a volunteer program, and that you want to have a fundraising program, and then help make sure that they're successful. Your standing in the public is very important. It's very, very important for the board members to understand that as the board leadership of your organization, you are truly the public ambassadors of your organization. How you conduct yourself in public, things you say, how you represent the organization. It's very important that you work every day to enhance the public standing. You know, as executive director of the U.S.-Mexico Border Philanthropy Partnership, I'm always very cautious to engage in activities in social media. Because I am the public face of the U.S.-Mexico Border Philanthropy Partnership, I don't engage in silliness in public, because while I may do it personally or may want to say something or do something personally, at the end of the day, I'm still the executive director of the U.S.-Mexico Border Philanthropy Partnership, and I have an obligation to represent our organization with dignity and grace every day. And so we work on that. And as a board member, you really have a similar obligation. And obviously, as board leaders, it's always important for you to be out recruiting your replacements and other colleagues to join with you in the mission of your organization. You must be so proud of the work you're doing that you want to share it. You want to be contagious in a good way. I say that jokingly during a pandemic, not to make jokes of a pandemic, but we want to be so proud and so excited about the work our organization does that we want others to see that enthusiasm that we have and invite others to participate with us. And obviously we need to make sure that all of us as board members are assessing our performance, and are we truly delivering and participating at the level that is required of the organization. There are 4 areas for boards to engage: strategic planning, management, external representation, and fundraising. These are truly the 4 areas where each of you is going to be working to help lead and engage for your organization. In the area of strategic planning, it's first important to understand or ask the very basic question: do you have a strategic plan? Hopefully all of you are saying, yes, we have a strategic plan. Your strategic plan is your roadmap. This is the plan that tells you where you're going, how you're going to get there, how much it's going to cost, and how are you going to measure your success. So it's really important to have that roadmap in place for your organization. Now, it's really important not just to have the roadmap, but is the board aware of the plan? Do new board members get an orientation when they come on to know what the plan is? Do you review the plan periodically? Is it up to date? Is it relevant? Is it current? You know, strategic plans have a lifetime. Typically, they go from 3 to 5 years, but they can be extended. If you do it right, it can guide your work for a decade. And, you know, that is one of the things that we have been able to benefit from. We had some really dynamic board leaders come in with some dynamic professional experience, and we had one of our own board members lead us through a strategic planning process in the year 2013. And that work is still relevant today. It is still the guiding roadmap for our work. After 7 years, we are still, actually now 8 years, we are still following that strategic plan because it's relevant, it supports the membership, we continue to grow each year, and so it has been working for us. And so the challenge for everybody on this webinar today is to evaluate, do you have a plan? Is it the right plan? Is it relevant? Is it meeting the expectations of your organization and your stakeholders? And does it provide the direction that you're looking to achieve in your local community? And it's really important to evaluate as board leaders. Are you making decisions in your board meetings that are contrary to your strategic plan, and why is that? And it's not that you can't go against your plan, but you should change your plan and update your plan if that has happened. And you also want to evaluate, is there enough balance between the board and staff members' responsibilities? And what this means is, did you create a plan that puts too much of the burden on the board? Did you create a plan that puts too much of the burden on staff? Or did you create a plan that has an equitable disbursement of the roles and responsibilities of everyone? Strategic planning is definitely a shared responsibility. You know, at the Board of Philanthropy Partnership, as I shared, it was led by our board of directors, which was their responsibility. And so our chairman at that time, who runs a nonprofit center at Arizona State University, I asked him to lead us, and he actually came to the conversation with a one-page strategic plan where we helped create goals and objectives that were SMART goals. They were specific, they were measurable, they were achievable, they were realistic. And they were going to allow us to implement them in a reasonable amount of time. But it was really important that the process took into consideration feedback from our member stakeholders, from our donors, from our partners, from our members, and that we could also ensure that we had great diversity. So we had men, we had women, we had people from the United States, we had people from Mexico, we had older people, we had younger people, we had staff, we had volunteers. We really had a diverse group. And so this is really a good roadmap for all of you to follow as you are setting out your responsibility to help launch a strong strategic plan for your organization. And it's really important that the board understand that it sets the organization's objectives. That is not a staff function, it is the board's function. And the distance that exists between the board and the staff, between the governance and the day-to-day management, really calls for a strong understanding and knowledge about your organization. So you want to have board members that understand their role and responsibility, but you also want to make sure your staff understands its role and responsibility, and that between the CEO and your board chair, that you have a great working relationship, because that is how this is going to all fit together in a nice and effective way. As you look to strengthen your strategic planning operation, you need to have clarity around your mission and your vision and your goals and your objectives and your activities. Your mission really needs to be clear, and at a moment's notice, your board leaders should be able to tell you what the mission is. You know, the mission of the Board of Philanthropy Partnership is to support a network of organizations that build prosperity through leadership, collaboration, and philanthropy in the US-Mexico border region. We repeat that every time our board members come together. We intentionally created a mission that they could all believe in, that they could all recite, and that they could all articulate and share with others. You know, it's really important to understand that a mission isn't something that's a page long or 25 sentences. It really needs to be something that you can live and you can breathe and you can represent. And so if your mission is something that you have to read off of a paper, I just invite you to consider, is it time to change it so that your mission is truly something that you can articulate at a moment's notice and share with others. I mentioned earlier that at the US-Mexico Border Philanthropy Partnership, we actually articulated a single-page strategic plan. And this is something that I've been working on now for over 15 years, 13 years at the Border Philanthropy Partnership, but several years ahead of this, before I came here, because by having everything on a single page, it helps keep everyone in the organization focused. And by having a single page strategic plan, it creates it's a great visual, it's easily shared, it's easy to repeat, and it helps keep everyone focused. You know, when I first joined the BPP, I did a tour along and across the US-Mexico border region from San Diego, Tijuana to Brownsville, Matamoros, traveling on both sides of the border, meeting in every group I would go, they would all show me, yes, and we have this beautiful strategic plan and it's on our shelf. And they were so proud of the big binder with all their information and their charts and their graphs of everything they were going to do. But what had happened was it all ended up in a book and it got put on the shelf. And so what happens is when you have a single page strategic plan, you can hang this on the wall. You can make it a part of your board materials. You can share it with stakeholders. You can make it a public and living document for your organization because it's clear and easy to understand. It unifies the vision for the board and the staff, and it tells everybody a clear picture of what needs to be done and how you're making progress. You focus on what you can achieve in both the short and long term, and it really can help you capture the core values and goals and objectives. So I want to share with you what our annual plan looks like for 2021. And this is a representation. This is our annual plan, but this is a summary of what our strategic plan also looks like. So you can see we focus on 3 areas. It's led off at the top by our mission and our vision. I've already shared with you what our mission is. Our vision is a thriving transporter region where our members collectively lead to create vibrant, successful communities, fostering stronger civil society and philanthropy. That's what we aspire to create over the next 10, 20, 30 years. But our mission, supporting a network of organizations building prosperity through leadership, collaboration, philanthropy in the US-Mexico border. But you can see everything else in this plan, our membership, our philanthropy, our leadership. These are our 3 goal areas where we work on membership, we work on philanthropy, we work on leadership. These are the things that make us possible. In our specific activities, the bullet points, strengthening our member retention, completing border briefs, adding 100 new tools to Procapacidad, and we will make all of this available to you so you can see. But the point of sharing this right now is to get everything you want to do on a single piece of paper so that you can celebrate who you are, what you do, and why you do it, and make it known to your local community. As board members, your second area of responsibility is management. You need to ensure that you have the proper management team in place. You're supporting the mission of the organization. You're maintaining external strong relations with the local community and key stakeholders and donors. And the board chair, perhaps even the executive committee, will have a relationship with your CEO. You can have relationships with the staff, but what's really important is the board manages the executive director or your chief executive officer, and the chief executive officer manages the staff. And it's really important to understand that role and responsibility because there are so many examples where boards try to meddle in staff issues, and that is really inappropriate, and it really breaks down the trust that needs to exist because that is really the purview of the executive director. So it's really important that everybody agree to stay in their lane, and when people start to deviate from their lane, you should have a conversation and get everybody back to where they're going, but that really gets to be a complicated situation where people start to evaluate, hey, this person's not doing their job or whatever. You know, there's a time and a place to have those conversations privately, but they should not become a discussion at the board level. Now, if you have a serious problem where somebody in the organization has done something public and it's a problem for the organization, then perhaps in extreme circumstances, conversations should be held in the boardroom. But typically, staff issues should be staff issues and left to the CEO to manage. Obviously, finances need to be addressed. And what this is you need to have protocols in place around your finances, about spending authority, about signing authority at the banks for wire transfers or payments to be made, about compliance with the audit and submittal of reports. In Mexico, the rules are different than they are in the United States. A lot of compliance is demanded. The mistrust that exists in Mexico of the nonprofit sector in general, by having strong protocols and procedures in place around the finances of the organization, you can help ensure that things are moving in a smooth operation. External representation. This is very, very important to understand how strong it is and important it is to support the external representation as ambassadors of your local organization in the local community. You know, you want to be effective ambassadors. You want to help maintain expectations. So when the community says, hey, we need you to be doing this. You could be out as an ambassador representing those opportunities to support those organizations. You know, there's so many different amazing groups in San Miguel de Allende that are just doing heroic work. We've had an opportunity to visit so many of them. I don't want to mention anybody in specifically, but we've had the opportunity to meet with over 20 organizations at their physical location in San Miguel, and they're just doing wonderful work. So as board leaders, your opportunity is to go out and help make the community understand what the opportunity is to engage with your organization, to be supported by your organization, but also for the community to support you and your organization. But it's also important for you to understand what's going on locally. So in your organization, if you can make an impact on an issue that's developed in San Miguel, then this is your opportunity to bring suggestions and recommendations to the board to help engage your organization in a more compelling and powerful way locally, as well as identifying those opportunities for new donors, new stakeholders, new volunteers, new programs, new services. So much opportunity exists. In the area of fundraising, one of the areas that a lot of people say is, oh, I don't want to have to help raise money, but as a board leader of your organization, this is one of the most critical roles that you play. If you agree to serve on a board, you are agreeing to help secure the resources they need to be relevant in your local community. By being relevant, there's so many things you can do. First, you have to know the cause. What is it that your organization does? Who are you? What do you do and why do you do it? So you need to be able to articulate why your organization is important. What's the impact you're making in your local community? You want to be able to establish and cultivate relationships. So what this means is you want to be able to say, oh, there's this new business in town. They should be interested in what we're participating in, or perhaps there's a local philanthropist, or there's some people that I know you have a Rotary Club. Perhaps it's a great way to cultivate the engagement of the Rotary Club members in the local activities of your organization. So by establishing that relationship, letting them know who you are, what you do, and why you do it, it helps invite them to the process. You're cultivating them to become volunteers, to become stakeholders, to become donors, or to become a future board leader. You also need to identify and set personal goals. For example, if your organization needs to raise $10,000 in a single year, or maybe 200,000 pesos. So we need to determine what of that goal responds to you. Maybe your goal is to help raise $1,000, or maybe you have to come up with 10,000 pesos. Well, what can you do to help make that a reality? You could give the money yourself. Maybe you have a family member that would chip in. Maybe you could organize a little fundraiser at work. You could do an online campaign. There's so much you could do, but we need each of you to have a personal goal that is really attainable, but also a little challenging, because one of the things that happens if your organization is going out and seeking grants, and because all of you are likely an American audience, you might be trying to raise money in the United States. Well, one of the things that's happening in the United States with the American foundations is they're wanting to know what the contribution level is of the board leadership. And do they have 100% giving to support the organization? And so it's going to be really important that you support your organization annually with a cash gift. It might be $100, it could be $500. Maybe you're in a position to give $1,000, $1,500, $5,000. Maybe you could give $10,000. And if you need to be able to get a tax receipt for that, there's many of the nonprofit organizations in San Miguel de Allende are set up to receive money in the United States. If you're not, we can help introduce you to organizations that do that through community foundations, through the Board of Philanthropy Partnership. There are many opportunities to make an annual cash gift in American dollars and receive a tax deduction for your contribution. And then there's many other types of resources. You could do online giving, you could do online campaigns, you could set up a GoFundMe page, you could do all sorts of things, even through the Board of Philanthropy Partnership, through our Flip Cause platform on our website. We actually help organizations raise resources online. So there's so much you can do. The relationship between the board and the executive director is really important. This is truly the most important relationship that exists for an organization. It's really important that there be a bond of friendship, of collegiality, of partnership between the board and the executive director. There are many groups out there that have contention, and there's fighting and disagreement. And it's not to say that you can't have disagreement, but it should never get to a point of being disagreeable. When it's disagreeable, there is a problem in the organization. It could be a problem of incompetence. It could be a problem of lack of understanding. It could be a problem of ignorance, or it could be a problem of personality conflict, or it could be a problem of lack of teamwork between the board and the executive director. There's an organization I've been coaching for the last 6 months. They're in a very difficult situation because they hired a search firm here in the United States to help them identify a new executive director for their organization. And the person that was selected, I believe, knowing what I know is coaching this situation, that this person overstated their credentials to be an executive director. And this is an organization with an organizational budget of almost $5 million. So it does impressive work with a lot of volunteers and important stakeholders and donors, from large corporations to individual philanthropists, because that's where the money's coming from. And this new executive director came in and really just started dropping the ball everywhere. And what developed is the board chair started to realize, because the board chair was helping this person cultivate relationships and was seeing that the balls were getting dropped. And so when the board chair brought it to the attention of the ED started to tell stories and lie and create situations, and really started to create a barrier between the executive director and the board chair. And what happened is this led to a complete breakdown. But unfortunately, what happened was a couple of board members tried to take up the cause of the executive director. So they lost sight of their role and responsibility. And it turns out that the board member that was behaving badly, this is the first time they'd ever served on a board. Long story short, the executive director had to be fired. Lawyers had to be contracted. This is a situation that is going on as we speak. And so I share this situation because it's so important to build a constructive relationship. Nobody wants to volunteer in a situation where there's amity, where there's difficulty, where there's arguments. So we want to make sure that there's an interdependence. We want to share responsibilities. We are together in this. The board and staff work as a team. They have different roles and responsibilities, but they're a team. We want clear expectations. Communication is key. We need to have clearly understood roles and responsibilities. And obviously, if we're strategically thinking, if we're constantly focused on the goal, the mission, the vision of the organization, we stay focused on what the strategic issues are, instead of micromanagement, we're going to be doing great. And obviously, honesty and integrity really helps bridge the complexities of governance and leading so that everything can be addressed in a significant and important way. I don't know how many of you on our call are the actual chairs of the local boards of directors, but it's really important to be an effective advisor to the executive director. Board chairs have a tough job, and they have to ask tough questions. They have to make tough decisions. They have to act when necessary. They also have to come in with a good attitude about strategy and succession planning, because they're going to start to see who's participating, who's not, who comes to the meetings, who doesn't. They're also going to be working collaboratively with the executive director so they can manage expectations and create the agendas and the processes and the rules for decision-making and for the board meetings. We want to have a very professional relationship with the management team, because the board chair is going to be the one person at the board level that is really going to have a much more engaged level of interaction with the organizational staff. And obviously maintaining effective communication and facilitation. But what's really important is the board chair is to really have an ongoing, regular, weekly communication and ongoing partnership with your executive director. And so next I want to share the roles and responsibilities of the executive director. You know, it really is concomitant on the executive director to build that relationship with the board. It really falls to your paid staff leader, your executive director, to create those opportunities, to maintain open those communication channels, to seek feedback from board members outside of board meetings. If you're only communicating with your board members at the board meetings, there's a problem. The executive director should be engaging with all the board members on a regular basis through email or WhatsApp or personal phone calls or personal visits. I know we're in a pandemia, and so it's a little more complicated, perhaps because of COVID, people are not getting together, but we really want to make sure we're maintaining open communication channels. The board is independent, so it's really important for the executive director to allow the board to be independent. They're supposed to provide oversight. They're supposed to ask tough questions. If something's not going well, it's their right to say, hey, what's going on? What do we need to do? Why is this happening? What can we do about it? How do you need help? Do you need money? Do you need advice? What can we do to navigate this situation? And it's really important to understand that you have different skill sets in your board. So some people are going to be really good at opening doors. Some people are going to be really good at raising money. Some people are going to be really good at identifying new leaders. And it's really going to be important to understand where the different skill sets are of your board to help take advantage of all of them. A few things that I do to help build strong relationships. I maintain very regular communication with the board. I send them updates all the time. At least once a month, they hear from me, but usually once every 2 weeks. I speak with my board chair at least once a week, probably several times a week. Silly things, fun things. If I know somebody on our board is having a birthday, I call the board chair and I say, hey, today is Joe's birthday. Could you send him a note? That way it builds camaraderie. But those are all things I do behind the scenes to help build friendship, collegiality, partnership at the board level. Because the more united your board is, the more they support one another in both their personal and professional engagements, the stronger the board becomes. One of the things we've done really well at the Board of Philanthropy Partnership is we've built an amazing board and we maintain that. We constantly are getting people approaching us saying, hey, we want to be on this board, but we don't just let anybody on. We want to make sure we have people that can help us achieve our mission, people that are going to bring a level of expertise, a level of commitment. It costs a lot of money because we're binational and you have to travel, and that involves a lot of effort. We need to have people that either can personally handle that or their organization can handle it. But more importantly, we specifically go after skill sets in different, we built a matrix to identify characteristics and qualities of board leadership that were important to us, about diversity, about demographics, about age, about where they're from. Because we're binational, we need people from the US, we need people from Mexico, but because the borderlands has 10 states, we need people from California to Texas and from Baja California to Tamaulipas. So we have to have representation, geographic representation. We need people from foundations, from academia, from the business sector, from foundations, from government. So for us, this has been a way for us to build this. So the reason I share all of this is for you to take all of these ideas and figure out how it becomes relevant to each of you. The board responsibilities include these 4 key areas. Advising the executive director effectively. It's really important that you provide your knowledge and expertise. You were selected to serve on this board because you bring knowledge, you bring information, you bring talent. And please don't sit on it. Please share it willingly, openly, and they will appreciate you for it. It's okay to ask difficult questions. Now, we don't have to be disagreeable when we're asking our difficult questions. That makes the answers a little more difficult, but we should ask difficult questions because it helps get to the root of where we're trying to go. Sometimes you have to act when necessary. The group that I mentioned that they had to fire the executive director, they had to act. Their relationships with key donors were being impacted. staff was being shared information that shouldn't have been shared. Board members were acting inappropriately. They took a strong organization and was starting to have some incredible challenges, and the board had to act. And so they acted in a powerful and compelling way. But most importantly, we need to demonstrate a total commitment and participation. This shows that you are the ambassador of the organization where you are participating and that you are engaged. There are very important shared responsibilities. First and foremost is we always must act in the best interest of the organization. I'm constantly telling people what really matters is the institution, the organization. People are important, but all the people are participating to support the mission of the organization. It's the institution that matters. The institution is what is going to provide the service. The people actually do the work, but it's under the banner of the institution. So we need to build close relationships, but we need to be independent. Close relationships doesn't mean we cover for one another or we hide things, but rather that we support one another and that we respect and honor each other's contributions. We need to set very specific, precise expectations. What is it that is expected of you? If you do not have a contract for your board members, you should create one. We can provide samples for you to consider. I know they're available in Spanish on our Procapacidad website. We can create them for you or make them available to you in English. But what it does is it allows you, when somebody comes on your board, you say, look, as a board member, we expect you to attend monthly meetings, quarterly meetings, annual meetings. We expect you to make a charitable contribution. We expect you to open doors. We expect you to, whatever it is you expect them to do. If you put it on paper and you outline for them exactly what is expected, it helps them be a much more engaged board member because they know from the beginning what you want from them. Because if you don't tell them, they won't know. And so it really helps establish defined roles and responsibilities. And I even invite you to ask them to sign the contract at the end because it really just makes that extra commitment that really is an opportunity for that to happen. We have Malaura has put in the chat the portal for you to see. So thank you, Malaura, for making that available. It's also important to be humble and to exhibit humility. So many organizations get into trouble because egos of people get out of control or somebody's larger than life personality gets in the way of achieving what's really important for the organization. And so I think one of the things that helps bring people to us and helps make people want to be a part of something is when they see that we're truly about the mission, that we lead with humility and self-knowledge. It really helps make it an inviting environment for people to participate. And obviously always demonstrating honesty, respect, and transparency in everything that you do. Let's take a little deeper look at the role of the executive director. The executive director really works in five areas, as leader, as a visionary, as a decision maker, as the manager, and as a support person to the board of directors. These are the 5 areas that these people are going to be working in. So let's take a look at each of these. As a leader, they provide direct support and advice to the board of directors. It's ultimately the board of directors' decision, but they should be making their decision with the best information they can get from their executive director. When I first went to work for my first board of directors, when we were preparing the board book of information, we were actually required to provide scenario plans for each. So when we would take an issue, we wanted the board to do X, or we were asking the board to consider doing X project. We had to give them 3 scenarios, 3 recommendations they could consider for action. And then there had to be a consideration of ramifications for each of those decisions or opportunities for action. And the point was to give them the best advice that they needed so that they could make the best decisions. It doesn't mean they were limited to those options that we were providing them, but it forced us as the staff to get as creative as possible to tell them that to make X happen, they could do A, B, or C. And by doing A, B, or C, that C, D, or E would happen. And it really helped them do a better job. And so that was the direction we were provided by our CEO at that time. But it also helps for the organization to work to fulfill its mission. Obviously, the executive director as leader is motivating the staff to develop and implement programs, services, and operations, and obviously to do that day-to-day work. As visionary, it's important that the executive director provides adequate information to the board and to the staff. Reports should be made available so that they can see historical figures. They can see, are you trending upward? Are you trending downward? There should be a permanent look towards the future. Your executive director is the liaison between the board and the staff. The only person that should be engaging directly, consistently with the board of directors is your executive director. That doesn't mean others can't engage with the board because you may have committees that they staff, but nothing should happen at the board level without the knowledge of the executive director as it relates to the staff. And obviously the executive director is truly that link between the organization and your local community. It's also important to understand the executive director is a decision maker. This person suggests missionary, relational, and personal management and financial policies to the board. And obviously is the person that has to decide and guide staff actions and operations. So as the decision maker under the annual plan that the board approves, this is the person that leads the day-to-day activities of your organization. And obviously as manager, the executive director is responsible for the day-to-day management of all your organizational operations. They have to make sure the strategic plan is implemented. They have to manage the human resources and obviously the physical and financial resources. If you have a building or a location, if you rent or own your space, do you have the financial wherewithal? Obviously the day-to-day administration of your organization is going to fall to the leadership of the executive director. And how is this person supporting the board of directors? Well, this person supports their own evaluation. It should provide the information to the board about all the different activities that have happened so that the board can complete an annual review of the executive director's performance. The executive director also participates in the selection and evaluation of board members. It's not that the person is evaluating the board members, but they'll have a process in place, and the executive director can manage the process, can create the tools and resources to allow board members to do self-evaluations or to allow the executive committee to determine if Sally and Joe are doing their job. Obviously, the executive director makes recommendations to support the board during orientation and evaluation. There should be an annual event for board orientation for new members to be acquainted with what their role and responsibility is, or for current members that might need a little extra support to understand what it is that you want to do them. So these are very important activities for the executive director to support the board. Now I'd like to transition to talk about strategic board recruitment. It's really important for each of your organizations to have a plan to constantly be looking for organizations or for leaders to join your organization. So it's important for you to identify the skills and experience that you feel is necessary for your organization to have a more effective board. I earlier shared that we created a matrix. And so what we did at the Board of Philanthropy Partnership is we used an Excel document, and we had a conversation. We had a strategic conversation where we asked the board members, what's important to us? What skill sets, what experience do we want for people to bring to the Board of Philanthropy Partnership? In this list that you see here on my slide is the information that was shared. They wanted people that had management and business experience. They wanted people that could do planning. They wanted people that knew how to raise money. They wanted people that had a financial background. They wanted people with public relations or communications experience. They wanted somebody with legal experience, with human resources, people that are experts at programs and services. The reason I mention all of this is because this was important to us. Now, we weren't looking for a single candidate that could do all of this. Superman, I don't know that Superman or Superwoman exists, but certainly collectively we can find Supermen and Superwomen. And so we did is we said, all right, we want people with these areas of expertise, but we also said, let's go in and look for some other essential skills. And so we went in and we said, we want people with leadership skills. We want people with strategic thinking and creativity. We want people that are community leaders. We want people that can, when we say political promoters, we don't mean politicians. We don't mean people from elected office. What we mean is people that can help navigate public policy advocacy. And obviously diversity. Diversity is very important. So we want to have people, male, female. In our case, we want to have people from the United States, from Mexico. We want young, we want older, we want a whole host of people representing, so that we have a collection of leaders from across the communities that we serve. This was really important for us to identify these skill sets. Now, on top of that, we also wanted to review what our current board looked like. So what we did is, in creating the matrix, we created a self-assessment, and we invited each of the board members to go in and identify the skill sets that we had outlined, so that they could tell us which of those skill sets and characteristics did they personally bring to the table. And so at the end of the process, we were able to identify that we have people that are good at fundraising. We have people with business background. We have people that know how to do public policy advocacy or programs. And so what it did for us is it highlighted where we were deficient. For us, one of the areas we were deficient is in geographic representation. And so we made a concerted effort to grow our geographic representation, because we always had equitable balance, because half our board member comes from the United States, the other half comes from Mexico. But there were glaring holes is where people were coming from. At one point, we had 3 people from Arizona. It's not that we don't want 3 people from Arizona, but should we have 3 people from Arizona and nobody from New Mexico? So for us, we made a decision to let somebody go away from Arizona when their time came up, but also to replace that person with somebody from New Mexico to start to create balance. In Mexico, at that time, we didn't have anybody from Nuevo León, and we wanted to expand into Monterrey and some other areas. So it allowed us to start seeking people specifically from those areas. And so by identifying the characteristics and skill sets, we were able to create a job description for a board member that says, we're going to meet these many times. We want you to have some of these skill sets and characteristics. And then we started the recruitment process. So we started to look at what organizations out there in our member network, who's there from academia, the business and corporate partners, foundations, government, academia. Who could we find within those organizations? And we started a process, and we started to have meetings with them. And at a critical point, we actually invited them to join our board, and the process worked. And so that was really exciting for us, because we now have more leaders from the business sector on our board. We have more leaders from Mexico, from the foundation world on our board. We have 2 leading foundations from Mexico on our board, the Montemayor Foundation, as well as the Titi Munoz Foundation. Arca Continental from Monterrey, the Coca-Cola bottling company, sits on our board. And we also were able to bring in somebody who's an expert in public policy advocacy. He's now our treasurer. And it was also important for us to try to get a national funder from the United States. And so we've been successful in recruiting somebody from the Annie Casey Foundation to join our board. And so the reason I share all of this with you is because it's a process. Now, I know that if you're in a small community or your organization is small, who are you going to go after? Well, you could think about somebody from the bank where you have your accounts. You could think about somebody that's involved in the Rotary Club. You could think about the local business community. You could go to the local government and talk with the office led by Francisco Garay and Fernandez Esparza, and talk to them about potential volunteers that could be considered to support your organization. So you have a whole host of opportunities right there in San Miguel or in Greater Guanajuato to help spearhead bringing people in to your organization. Board meetings are really important for your organization. And it's really important for you to determine what is the appropriate number of meetings your organization needs to have. Some boards need to meet monthly, and that works great for them. Some boards meet every 2 months, some meet quarterly, some meet once a year. Once a year is not enough. Some meet weekly, that's too much. My organization wanted to meet monthly. And 13 years ago, when they said, well, we're going to meet monthly, I pleaded with them to meet quarterly. I said, if we meet monthly, all I'm going to be doing is creating minutes and agendas for board meetings, and we're never going to advance as an organization. And so we agreed to meet quarterly, and it's worked tremendously for us because it allows us to actually build momentum and to engage programs and services. And because of those decisions and because of the other ways we have of coming together, we can meet between meetings. We created an executive committee to meet to handle matters that need to be considered by the board leaders between meetings, and it allows us to be much more nimble, much more effective. And so it's made our board meetings much more engaging. But we also have created some additional areas. We created a dynamic group of people, but we also use a form of meetings that really works well. I'm sure the Americans in the audience would agree. It is very common in the United States, not so much in Mexico, but it's something that we encourage people to use. But it allows us to focus our time together in a strategic way and not in wasting people's time with mindless reading of reports or discussions on matters that are not strategic. And so we use actually a consent agenda, we use an action agenda, and we use an information agenda for our meeting. So for one meeting, we actually have 3 agendas. The consent agenda is reviewed ahead of time, and there's a simple motion to approve it. So everything that's on the consent agenda is moved and approved immediately. So we spend no time on the consent agenda in the meeting. Now, that doesn't mean that if there's something on the consent agenda, you can't say, hey, I want to talk about it. Of course you can. But typically, if you do a good job putting the right things on your consent agenda, you're not going to have these issues develop. And so it should just be approved. Where you really want to be spending your time is on your action agenda, the things that are of strategic importance and that need decision and discussion by the board. And so you're able to evaluate. And then information agenda, for us, the information agenda usually is my report, a membership status report, finance reports. We have some of that put on the information agenda. So it can be reviewed, but it doesn't have to be discussed completely amongst the entire board. So some questions. How are your meetings going in your organization? Does your CEO present a long activity report? Do your executive director present ideas and projects that the board simply ratifies? Do you only listen? Is there little interest? Do people miss the meetings? So it's important. It's not to say that if these things happen that everything's bad for you, but you want to help encourage interest. You want participation. You don't want people to miss. They're going to miss at some point. Not everybody can always be there, but can they participate remotely? Can they send in some written comments? Is there other ways for you to engage them? There's nothing wrong with a long activity report, but it needs to be done in a way that's compelling, that's strategic. I work very hard in my report, I bring issues of importance to the board, things that are brewing in the organization that they need to be made aware of. I don't want to waste their time with things that can happen to anybody and you just solve it. So it's things that, when we needed a new server and our technology was in a problem, I brought in, we had a strategic discussion around technology and getting their feedback on how we could make some improvements and how we could pay for it. So that was a different story. But I don't go to them and say, hey, we need to buy a new laptop, that kind of thing. You should build in the systems so that your organization can function appropriately during the year. And you want to have conversations with the board members so that they actually are leading them, that they're actually owning them. We actually divide our board members into committees. Some of the committees work better than others. And we have an emeritus committee of really important former board members, the ones that are the most engaged. Not everybody becomes an emeritus member, but it's a way for us to engage the most engaged people. And so there's almost, what we've created is people want to get onto that emeritus committee. So in order to do that, they work hard and they really show that they're committed to the organization. So there's lots of ways for you to move to more effective strategic meetings. And one of the things we do is we use the same format. We have obviously been able to create a partnership between our board chair and our executive director. And so for us, our board chair is ensuring that the meetings are well organized and they start and finish on time. Alyssa de la Vara is our board chair. She's in her second year. She's doing a fantastic job and she keeps us focused on strategic issues. Obviously, if people want to have side conversations, she'll say, let's do that after the meeting, but she keeps people engaged and she's really good at, if somebody's not participating, she'll reach out and say, hey, Joe, what do you think about this? We haven't heard your opinion yet. Would you please what do you think? We also work very hard to make sure everybody gets their information ahead of the meeting. It's really important. We try to do it a week out. Sometimes it gets 5 days, sometimes 3 days, depending on what's going on. But we really try to give everybody a week of time to review the material. And we also have to create our material because not everybody is bilingual. So we do an English packet, we do a Spanish packet. Some of you may need to do the same in your organization because maybe not everybody's fully bilingual. But if you're doing that, you need to add some additional time. And so if we were meeting monthly and I had to create 2 board packets every month, that would be a disaster. But you can certainly find ways for all of you to engage and to have the information you need to make the best decisions possible. And obviously, letting people know at the beginning of the year when the meetings are going to be held. We meet at the same date and same time every year. We meet in January, we meet in April, we meet in July, and we meet in October, almost to the same date. And we always meet from 10 to 11:30. And those are our times. We used to meet, when we're meeting in person, we actually come together and we actually change locations. We do half the meetings in Mexico, half of them in the United States, and we spend a little more time together. We also try to put on an event when we do that. During the pandemic, we've been meeting virtually, so we've condensed our meeting times to just an hour and a half. And our executive committee meets before each of the board meetings. So you can find whatever that rhythm is to you to make sure that your meetings are effective. It's really on the executive director to make sure that the information is prepared properly for the board meeting and to send it to everybody in advance. I know some groups in Mexico don't send it ahead of time. But it's really important to give people the time they need to review the information ahead of time so they can come prepared with questions, comments, concerns, suggestions, and recommendations. And really, it's important following the meeting to get the minutes out because it's, you want to make sure that they're accurate, and you also want to make sure you're sending reminders to the board meeting for the next board meeting out to the board members. We always say, look, we're a month out. We send out the reminder. We tell them what the agenda is. We solicit feedback. Is there something you want added to the agenda? And it gives everybody the opportunity to feel ownership, that it's their meeting, that they can contribute to the comments, they can contribute to the agenda, and it really has worked well for us. I mentioned briefly how this works for us to create our agenda, and this is something I started in my previous life when I worked for 15 years at Kiwanis International. During my initial years there, the board meetings were painful. People would stand up and they would read a report out loud. So if the CEO penned a report, he would actually stand and read his report to the entire board, word for word. It would take forever. Then the president would read his report, and the president-elect and the treasurer, everybody would read the reports. And we finally had to let everybody know that everybody could read, and the material was translated. So there was no reason to waste time reading everybody's reports. And so what happened is all the reports went on the consent agenda. And that way we were no longer wasting valuable time. We brought people from all over the world together from many different countries. We had a 21-member board representing at least 14 countries. And it was really important to spend our time together talking about how to grow the organization, how to achieve the mission. And sometimes reading those reports doesn't grow the organization or achieve the mission. So it's really important to recognize the challenge in the room and put those things that you don't need to waste time on the consent agenda, and really focus your efforts on the action agenda. Approve that new program, approve that new fundraising strategy, approve that new staff person position that's going to help grow your organization, approve that new board member that's going to come on and just be a dynamo to make your organization really go to that next level. Approve that budget, approve the audit, the things that really give importance and credence to the future of your work. And then obviously the reports, put them in your information area. That doesn't mean don't review or don't understand what's going on, but spend your time as board leaders participating prior to the meeting and not reading reports when you show up. And that will make you just a fantastic board member, and the organization where you're serving is really going to see the difference. You know, using the same format really helps maximize your time together. The way we do it is we start out with who's in the room. We list everybody with their title, the board chair, and we do them in order of seniority: the board chair, the vice chair, the secretary, the treasurer, the immediate past chair, then the board members. And we put them in, not in alpha order, but who's been there the longest. So the people with a little more seniority, we show that they're a director. Then we have a welcome. We do a mission moment when we start our, we help people understand what's been going on at BPP. Is there a cool story we can tell about something that happened in our organization? Did we get a recognition? Did somebody like what we did, or did our newsletter get an award, or something to make people feel proud about what's going on in the Board of Philanthropy Partnership? So I'm inviting all of you, what is that thing that's going on in your organization that everybody at your board needs to know about? And you should share that as a mission moment in your organization. Did you give out a scholarship? Did you, if you're a health clinic providing critical services, did you do 10,000 COVID vaccines? Did you do, did you give away a scholarship? Did you help more families with a food drive than you've ever done? Did you raise more money to support your project? You know, what is it that happened? Did you identify a new stakeholder? What is it that really came forward that everybody can get behind and rally and be supportive of and be excited and proud of? And then obviously we move into the consent agenda, the action agenda, and then followed by the information agenda, but really focusing our efforts in our board meeting on the action agenda. And we always follow up at the end. We remind everybody what the dates are. And it's funny, you know, everybody else say after the meeting, oh, that's great. Now, when's the next meeting? And the material is right there in front of them, but we're constantly reminding, publishing, sharing. You know, everybody's a volunteer, so we can't expect them to know everything, but we should make it easy on them. And we should remind them and give them the information, because we really want this to be a wonderful experience. And the other thing I would share with you is we go through our deliberations. There should be recommendations. What is it that you're recommending? Are you recommending that a new person be hired? Are you recommending that a new van be acquired for the services you provide? Are you recommending a new program? And when you do that, you really need to explain what it is that's happening. Why are you doing it? What's the strategic intent? What's the financial obligation? Is this new decision going to cost 100,000 pesos? Is this new decision going to require the effort of more staff? It's really important to consider all of your decisions, what the financial and human resource impact is going to be. You know, your agendas need to be specific. They should be well planned. They need to be relevant. You don't want to be bringing everybody together for a meeting that doesn't have an agenda, that doesn't have a plan. You know, when I was a volunteer, I was the president of a local Kiwanis club, just like Rotary. And many of you I know are Rotarians in San Miguel. And when I was president, when we set out, I even organized a field trip. We would, at that time, we met at my house. We met at the end of the day. My wife and children would leave. I would go get a couple bottles of wine and a little cheese tray, so we'd have some snacks to eat on. And at one point, we took a side trip. I wanted the board to consider a new project. And the new project was a sponsorship of a baseball league. And I wanted us to choose this sponsorship because I wanted to improve our name recognition. I wanted us to spend some money, but I also wanted us to recruit the parents of the kids we were going to sponsor to become new members. And I also wanted us to do this because the baseball fields we were going to be playing was at one of the schools where our kids were in programs that we were supporting for them to bring up their grades and improve their study habits. And so there was this opportunity for us. And so strategically, I organized during our board meeting, we did a quick side trip over to the baseball diamond where it was actually going on. And I let everybody see how our name would appear in the baseball field as a sponsor. I let everybody see all the parents we could approach to try to get maybe 5 of them to become members or donors. I wanted them to see the kids playing because they were the same kids that were in the sports, in the scholarship programs we were supporting at the school that was right behind us. And so there was a strategy behind it. And so I share that because sometimes meetings aren't just about the agenda, but it's also about what are we trying to accomplish? And so I had a very specific intention when I was bringing the volunteers together because I wanted us to deviate some money from our budget to help support a program that was going to help support more kids, but also allow us to approach those parents to also support our work and to become engaged with us and be volunteers too. And it really worked. And to this day, that club continues to grow and do great things in that community. And it's because we really defined who we were, what we did, and why we did it. And we made it as public as possible. You know, I shared with you that in each board meeting, I do a report for the board. And as I shared with you, I divided out in various areas. I let them know what's going on, where have we made advances, what are some achievements in our programming. I let them know where we've been. Have we been out networking? Who have we been meeting with? What have we been talking about on behalf of our organization? In the area of our finances, you know, I let them know, where are we at? Are we behind in our dues collections? Are we ahead in our fundraising? Are we behind in our receivables? Are we ahead in our payables? I let them know what's going on. I let them know about some opportunities that are brewing. Hey, we have some new opportunities for partnerships over here. In the area of staff, did we make some changes? Did somebody get an award? Has somebody been with us for a specific amount of time? And then also always trying to include all of them in my report. So when I'm reporting back to them, I'll let them know, oh, and did you know that our board chair did this? And did you know that our director did this? And did you know that this board member took care of this? And I'm always giving the credit back to those board members, because what happens is they start to see that they're always mentioned in the report. So it's a way to incentivize them, or not to incentivize them, but to recognize their participation. So when they're out doing cool things, I'm paying attention and I see it and I celebrate them in my communication back to the board. And it's really important. And it's done sincerely. It's done because it's what allows our organization to achieve our mission locally. And it's, you know, it's very important. So obviously this is a report that they received. It's not voted on. It's not read aloud, but it certainly, it can be discussed, but it's really to tell them what's going on in the organization. So, you know, really it's the final point I want to make to you today about making your board role and responsibility much more effective is if you're not succeeding, it's not going to change unless you make some changes. And so you need to change how you're operating, or you need to change the people in the room. And you can do both. You could simply change how you're operating and take a rather inactive or potentially ineffective group and make them extraordinary. Or you can make some adaptations, bring some new people in, and really change how you're operating. And if you get your board functioning well, it's going to be a much more enjoyable experience. Your organization is going to achieve amazing things, and it's really just going to be a wonderful experience. So I really invite you to consider these opportunities. And you really want to make this a partnership. And the partnership between the executive director and the board chair really needs to be close. And, you know, we change our board chairs every 2 years. I've had an amazing relationship over my 13 years at the Board of Philanthropy Partnership with every one of our chairs. They've all become dear friends. I keep in touch with absolutely every one of them. They all continue to be donors and supporters. They've all been wonderful cheerleaders and role models and mentors They engage with me. They contact me all the time about my family and my kids, and now my kids are in college. But we worked hard at building a partnership, and there's strategies behind that. It's intentional. You know, when they come to a meeting, I go get them. We go out for dinner. We speak every week. I inquire about their families. You get to know them. I find out what their spouse name is, or their kids, or their grandkids. I know you learn things about them, and you engage with them, and you demonstrate sincere interest about them and their lives, and they in turn do that with you. One of the strategies I've used is I've brought every one of my board chairs to my home and invited them to share family time with me and my wife and our children. They've become guests in our home. They've come for dinner. They've actually spent the night in our home, in our guest room, when they've come to town for a board meeting. And that has allowed us to build that personal relationship. You know, when you have breakfast with somebody and you have dinner with somebody and they sit on your couch with you and they see your kids play, it changes the dynamic, and it helps build that bond of friendship, of collegiality, of professionalism. And it's really worked. It's a strategy I learned all the way back in 1992. And I started to work in the world of volunteerism, and somebody said, Andy, to engage well with volunteers, you want to break bread with them. And he told me, it was so funny, his name was Larry Moore. He was from Redlands, California. He said, Andy, you want to eat something out of their refrigerator. Get to their home and have lunch with them, have breakfast with them, have dinner, break bread with them, form that special bond. And it is something that has just worked for me. I have thousands of friends in social media, and many of them are people I've met through volunteer networks. And you just build these amazing relationships with people. And so my parting words to all of you are to find that strategy that works for you, to build that partnership with your volunteer board members, with your colleagues, between the board and the staff. And when you do that, amazing things happen, and it allows your organization to just come forward and make extraordinary things come forward and to happen. It really is an opportunity for you to achieve your mission locally, and also to develop some amazing friendships and partnerships for the rest of your lives. And I know I've been doing this work since 1992 professionally, where I actually get paid. But I've been doing volunteerism since I was 12 years old. My sister worked for the American Red Cross, and as soon as she could put me in a swimming pool to swim laps to raise money for the American Red Cross, I've been doing it ever since. And so there's all sorts of ways for people to engage. And I want to thank all of you for participating today. Today is just a continuation of our support of the nonprofit sector in San Miguel de Allende. You're all doing heroic work. And it's not easy to work in a binational or international community where we have different cultures, different language, different, we use dollars and pesos. There's just some inherent roadblocks to having a smooth engagement with volunteerism. And you all do it remarkably well. And we've seen personally your commitment to make a difference in this community that is truly just heroic. And we honor you today, and we thank you for your service, and we thank you for your commitment to make this world a better place. And so I want to close with giving all of you my contact information. And once again, I'd like all of you to consider getting involved with us. Sign up to receive our newsletter. If you're bilingual, sign up for the English version and the Spanish version. Tell us what you're doing. Encourage your organization to become a member. Follow us in social media. We're active in Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. We're starting to get involved in Instagram. It's a little more complicated, and we don't have that big of a team, so it gets a little nutty. But you know, I'm happy to open this up to some questions. I see there's lots of chat going on. I don't know. I think it's my colleagues putting this. I don't see any questions. There is a, will this be available? Yes, we've recorded today's session. You're going to be absolutely able to share it. We will make the recording available to you that you can share with your fellow board members. And please do consider signing up for our newsletter. And if you'd like to also sign up to become a member, we'd be honored to have you engage with us. And it's not expensive. And we provide a lot of services. If your organization needs coaching or technical assistance, we'll sit down with you. A lot of the things we've talked about today, if you need help with this, if you're a member, we're going to sit down with you and we're going to help you figure it out. So it's a small investment of $450. It's an annual payment, and you can, we'll be happy to work with you and your organization. We also have the service of Foundation Directory Online, where we will help you in your fundraising efforts, where we will share with you access to a database that allows you to do some incredible fundraising research to help strengthen your ability to reach out and help invite people to co-invest with you to solve the challenges you've identified in your local community. So there's lots to do in San Miguel. It's a beautiful place. So I'm happy to answer any questions. So Malaura, if you want to help me answer a question or help identify what some of the questions are, I'm happy to answer them.
Yes, Andy, there's a question here in the Q&A panel. It says, how can a very humble founder, e.g. establish the organization's very first board without becoming their puppets? I have in mind a person who tends to shift his perspective depending on the latest mentor. Start with 2-3 mentors and call it a board? Should he start with an advisory board or inner circle versus a board of directors?
Well, an organization should have a board of directors. So is this a program? Is it an initiative, or is it an organization? If it's an organization, it should have a board of directors. And you don't want a board of directors that's just a bunch of people that are going to tell you yes. You want people that are going to challenge you. You want to bring different skill sets to the table. And that's why I go back to the slide. So I would encourage you to set up, to create a matrix, and we can send you one. If you want to put your contact information in the chat, Malaura can help me collect that, and we can help you build a matrix. So you really want to identify 5 to 7 people probably to get started and start to figure out who they might be. You can't change everything every time you come together. We dealt with that. We had a leader in our midst at one point that every time we came together, the person wanted to change our mission, and it was exhausting because we never moved forward. So I really encourage you to help build a board with 5 to 7 diverse people to get started, and it really will start to take shape, because it's not the executive director's decision. It's really the collective wisdom of the board of directors with input from the executive director.
We already got your contact information, so we can send you the matrix. There's also more than 300 tools for you to download and use at our website, procapacidad.org. And they're mostly in Spanish, but we have also many resources in English from all topics, from governance, fundraising, volunteering. So we can, if you email us, we can also send you what you need.
Any other questions? If there's no other questions, we just want to reiterate our appreciation. Fernanda, thank you for helping making today's presentation possible. It's been a pleasure for us to work with you and the team at your office. And since 2014, we've really had just an amazing experience working in San Miguel de Allende, and we look forward to many more opportunities working together. So thank you for your wonderful assistance. And I also want to give a shout out to my friend and colleague, Malaura Munoz. She and I worked together for 13 years, and she's just terrific. And I value her as a friend and a colleague, and as an expert in our sector for the US-Mexico borderlands as throughout Mexico. So thank you, Malaura.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Malaura. And thank for sharing with us all your knowledge and experience, and we will continue with this workshop. So see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.